It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, let's not keep the people waiting. Eventful weekend for the Pittsburgh Steelers, as we knew it would be with all the roster cuts, and we will get into that. But I feel like we've been talking about a potential trade for a while now. It made sense. Kevin Dotson really didn't have a path to playing time here, a guy that's made a ton of starts over his career with the Steelers, ton of starting experience. He was going to find a new home. The Steelers and Rams strike a deal over the weekend, sending Kevin Dotson to the Rams.
Yeah, it seems like the Steelers and Rams are deal friendly. They made that Allen Robinson trade, very similar trade where they just sort of traded back in the 7th round to get Allen Robinson, and here the Steelers trade up in the 5th round in
5th to the 4th and then 6th to 5th. Yeah, the following year.
Yeah, 5th to the 4th in 24 and then 6th to the 5th in 25. So, like, it's interesting because, teams don't want to give up draft picks because the number of draft picks you have, like, kind of limits what you can do in the draft. But, I mean, that's a pretty significant move. Like, that's good value. I would have to see, I'd be very interested to see, like, if you plug those into the draft value chart, like, what does moving up around from 6th to 5th and moving up around from 5th to 4th, like, what should, if they had traded that for a draft pick, like, what do you think it got them? Like, I bet it's more than people think. I think that's a pretty significant return for a player that, for the Steelers, was basically only going to play in, like, a catastrophe nightmare kind of situation this year.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think you look at if you're looking at the Rams roster, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it. They have like the high end talent, right? You got Stafford, you got Kupp, you got Aaron Donald, but like, it's not a very good roster. Like, I think that there's a very good chance that that's a pretty good 4th round pick too.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a team that I think is going to be like near the top of the NFL or something. Like they should be. It should be not only a move up in round, but I would think that the Rams will be drafting higher than the Steelers next year. Yeah. So I think you'll be talking about not just moving up in a round, but moving up in picks as well. So maybe the Steelers are drafting 20th and the Rams are drafting 15th. You're going to move up not just 32 picks, but you're going to move up 37 picks. And yeah, I mean, I just don't think that the Rams are very good. I mean, it's not a incredibly challenging division for them. Seattle's pretty solid. 49ers are pretty good. It looks like Arizona is trying to lose. We can talk about that news too at some point here today. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good trade. I don't know what you could possibly see as a downside. I mean, they do lose some depth, but it was really going to take a bad situation for Kevin Dotson to get on the field this year.
What I find funny, and I'm not trying to rip any one person or anything, but people are like,
"Oh,
why couldn't this have been?"
Hat on today? That's why. If it was Hater Smitty, if Hater Smitty was here,
let me turn the hat around.
Just ripping on people, just devastating people.
But what I don't get is people that are like, "Oh, why did it have to be Kevin Dotson and not Kendrick Green in this deal?" Kendrick Green doesn't get you the return that it got you. Like, you can't just trade whatever player you want. Trade all your bad players.
I guess Kyle Dubas has spoiled Pittsburgh fans. And they now have to be reminded that not every trade can be all of our bad players for all of your good ones. Yeah, look, I think that there's a chance they might trade Kendrick Green for something. He was a 3rd round pick. Like, it wasn't a good 3rd round pick, but somebody might see something in him. I'm not dismissing the idea. I also think this trade makes it much more likely that Kendrick Green ends up on the Steelers roster. I'm not predicting that to be the case, but like, we certainly need to talk about it like it's it's realistic. But it is hilarious that, like, it's funny to me because I feel like in general the Steelers fans have dramatically overstated how bad Kendrick Green is. Like, he is not an unplayable offensive lineman. He's not a very good center, but he looked good at guard against the Falcons. Like, he could do it. He's just not one of the Steelers' better guards. But if he's so bad that you all want rid of him, then why would any other team trade anything for him? I can't figure that the logic out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Do want to touch on, you mentioned that other trade, former Pittsburgh Steeler Josh Dobbs going to now another team, the Arizona Cardinals, and it could be their week 1 starter. I mean, between him and a rookie, what was it, 5th round pick, Clayton Tune, out of Houston. Very interesting here. Josh Dobbs recently just acquired there from the Browns. Is that who you think is going to be, Dobbs, as their opening day starter there?
Well, I'm not plugged in enough with the Cardinals to have any inside information. We got to get Donnie Druin on here. Donnie's my good buddy, covers the Cardinals for Sports Illustrated. Look, it does not appear that the Cardinals are serious about trying to win. I saw Clayton Tune at the Senior Bowl. I've heard that he's looked good in the preseason. I've not watched the Cardinals game. If he looks like he looked in the Senior Bowl, then Dobbs will clearly be the better option. And I don't say that with, I think, any sort of like misgivings about who Josh Dobbs is. Like, it's not a very good situation at quarterback for this Cardinals, who might, I mean, basically are throwing up the Caleb Williams flag before the start of week 1. Basically, is what appears to be happening.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into some of these roster cuts. I think, we saw kind of, I don't want to say 3 full rounds. So it was like a player individually, a round of 8, a round of 10 that we've seen over the weekend cut. Aaron Cruikshank was the one that was cut on his own. Speedy receiver who I thought actually, like, if they were able to get him the ball, flashed a little bit in that preseason finale, like using his speed down the field and was open a few times. Could have probably scored a long touchdown if quarterback could have hit him. Besides him, that first round of of 8 didn't have necessarily any standouts to me. I mean, Madre Harper had his moments, I thought, in camp, sounded like, but really nobody else. And then today, Tanner Muse and I would say Kenny Robinson are probably the 2 that were the most notable from today's round of cuts.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure that they're surprising to me that they were cut.
No,
I'm maybe a little bit surprised that they were cut in the order that they were cut, right? So, at safety, Trenton Thompson still on the team. So he's and it doesn't matter because all these guys go on waivers at exactly the same time, 12 o'clock on Wednesday. But I think generally the team is trying to. Trenton Thompson still on the team. Kenny Robinson off to me is a surprise. Nick Kwiatkowski still on the team, and Tanner Muse off is a surprise to me. I still had Muse and Robinson both missing the 53. They were among the more difficult cuts. I think Tanner Muse can be a good special teamer. I just think he's very far behind the other 4 inside linebackers in terms of playing inside linebacker. And, Nick Herbig is going to be a guy that's going to play some special teams and really has, as has been talked about a lot, more of an inside linebacker body type than an edge rusher anyway. So, he's obviously playing edge rusher and is going to play edge rusher. But if you start thinking about the kind of roles that he could take on special teams, it's more of the same roles that a guy like Tanner Muse would be filling instead of, I don't know, a guy like Quincy Roche, right, who's 50 pounds heavier, right? That's a totally different guy. And so I think that sort of made Muse expendable to me. Kenny Robinson, I just think that in the end, Miles Killebrew is going to be the one guy who makes this team that is really only useful on special teams. And I think it's unfortunate for Kenny Robinson because I think he was very clearly the 4th best safety. Although Trenton Thompson's still on the roster, so maybe the Steelers think differently. But I thought Kenny Robinson was the 4th best safety, and he loses out to maybe a guy who's a better special teamer in Killebrew and a guy who's maybe a bit more versatile like a Trey Norwood or like an Elijah Riley.
How do you feel about the prospects of either one of those guys or both coming back on the practice squad? I think to me, though, I'm not going to completely write it off, but to your point, those would typically be the guys the last ones cut. You would think, though, that they would be turning back to for that.
Well, I mean, we can break some news here on Steelers Afternoon Drive, and this is the smallest piece of news I can think of, so maybe it doesn't matter at all. But Kenny Robinson's locker was not cleaned out today after practice. So I don't know, make that out to be a big deal or nothing at all. Maybe he just didn't get around to it. But that I would not be surprised at all if he's a player that they would like to get to the practice squad. Whether that happens or not, he's got to clear waivers, and then he'll get a chance to look and see what his other opportunities are. Maybe somebody else look, the Steelers have 3 veteran, established, experienced safeties. Like, maybe he'll get an opportunity to go to practice squad on a team that is kind of maybe piecing things together in a different way, where playing time might be a little bit more obvious. I mean, basically with the Steelers, he's looking at he needs somebody to get hurt for him to get on the field. Maybe there's a place where that wouldn't be the case. So they got to play that game. But I think he's a guy they would like to have back to the practice squad. Tanner Muse, I think, much more likely to be poached just because of his level of experience as a special teamer. The Steelers have a lot of those guys. Not every team does. He's been with 2 teams before, NFL experience in a different way. So I think maybe he probably is a guy that somebody will come calling for. And again, another space where, the depth chart is very clogged up with veteran, established guys in front of him. Maybe he could find a place where things are a little bit softer. It's not just like Mark Robinson holding the door shut in front of him.
Generally speaking, though, am I off on that though? Like, is that just a stupid way of thinking that like their last round of cuts will typically be the guys that they get back on the practice squad?
I think that has generally been the way they've done things, but I think, like I said, like that's kind of taking it from the lens of like these cuts being at different times mattering. And I'm not really sure that they do. So like back in the day, when you would cut down in steps, like you'd cut 5 players and then 5 players or 10 players or whatever, then those players would go through waivers. And so if you had a guy you wanted to get to the practice squad, you would make sure to cut him in the last group because you wanted him in the biggest bunch. Try to bury that name in with like 10 other names to get through to the practice squad. Now what's going to happen is all the players the Steelers cut Saturday, the players the Steelers cut Sunday, all the players the Steelers cut today, and all the players the Steelers cut tomorrow will all go through waivers at exactly the same time at noon on Wednesday. And so I don't really think there's that gamesmanship of when they are going to release players when mattering as much anymore. I think it just, mostly will come down to who clears and who they want to keep. I do think it maybe says they like Thompson and Kwiatkowski more than I thought, but I don't think it would preclude these guys that are being cut now from making it to the practice squad.
Yeah, and I didn't even have like the waiver date aspect like in my mind saying that. I guess for me it was just thinking like, oh, this guy they literally want to hold on to until like it's so tough for them to cut him. They're waiting until the last possible second to do so. Like it's that tough for them to let go of this guy.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to talk to like Mike Tomlin about the process in this, before they sort of like the league mandated it and they kind of did it. Like last year, they made their first cut and second cut at the league deadline. Then they played their last preseason game. Then they cut all but like 5 or 6 guys, right? But right after their last preseason game, and then they made their last cuts right at the deadline. And this year, the process seems very different, right? I mean, some of it's because the league rules changed, and some of it's because they played a Thursday night game in the last week. So, cutting guys today really could be like cutting guys right after the last preseason game, right? But they had all these practices in between that Thursday night game and the deadline. So I guess they were trying to have some guys available for that, give guys, I don't know, one more shot or maybe just people to work so they'd give guys off and still have numbers. But it's definitely been a different process, and I would definitely be interested to see the explanation for why you cut 8 guys one day, 1 guy the next day, 10 guys, very different than what they've done in the past. And so I'm not really sure I know what to read into it right
now. Was there anybody, I don't think there's anybody that like jumps off the page. I think we've already kind of got to that. So you didn't think there was anybody that got cut that you expected to make the 53? At least yet.
No, the only player that I had on the 53 that is not going to be now is Kevin Dotson. It's just because I didn't predict a trade. I wrote in my 53-man projection that I still think they should be trying to trade him. But no, so I haven't – there's nothing that's been surprising to me other than maybe the order of operations there. A couple guys that are still standing a little bit surprising me, like Jordan Byrd, rookie wide receiver, who I honestly didn't see that much from in training camp. Like him still being on the roster now is a little bit surprising to me. Jonathan Marshall is a player that I actually like, but he's like the fourth nose tackle, and I think has no chance of making the team. So I'm not quite sure. Other than they are a little banged up at defensive tackle, like Cam Hayward and Larry Ogunjobi didn't play in that last preseason game, and have not been full participants in practice since then. And so maybe that's just a numbers thing. But they're still banged up at guard, right? James Daniels and Nate Herbig didn't play in that game, but Bill Duncan was cut today. So that was just a little bit of a back and forth thing. I'm not quite sure I know right now enough to read into what those moves mean, but there's no one that I think was cut so far that I would say, oh, he's definitely not making the practice squad because of when he was cut or anything like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Probably a little bit late news, and if people are subscribed to the channel, they should have watched your post game anyway. But obviously you weren't here on Friday. We had Nick Faribault joining us. What were some of your thoughts about the preseason finale?
I mean, offense looks incredible, continues to look incredible. I think don't sleep on the defense. The offense is making all these headlines. Starting defense didn't give up a single point. And throughout the preseason, that's almost as incredible as Kenny Pickett's perfect passer rating. It almost sets, it's like, it can't possibly be that good, right? I think they're going to be better than they were last year. We'll pick somewhere in between those two places, right? It's like we know they're not going to be flawless just throughout the season. Man, that's a bad and deeply flawed Atlanta team also. Like, let's take that in consideration too.
Yeah. A more impressive preseason, Kenny Pickett or Nick Herbig?
I'll say Nick Herbig because I had high expectations for Kenny Pickett. I thought he could be really good, and he has been. Nick Herbig has been just probably the biggest surprise on the whole roster to me in terms of like what I thought about him coming in to right now. I was very skeptical that he could stick as an edge rusher. Now I'm sure that he can, and maybe not as a starter, but certainly as a guy who comes off the bench and is a useful player. Like he's not just going to stick at edge rusher; he's going to play at edge rusher this year for this team. And I would be surprised if he does so and doesn't make an impact. Like that's where I'm at with him right now. And so he's probably been the biggest surprise to me on the entire team. Kenny has been, I think, surprising in some ways too. Like I don't always think that he's been the best in these sort of low stakes environments. He's been extremely good. I was not surprised at all by his poise, his leadership, all the intangible stuff. I've always thought he's been off the charts in terms of, but the ball looks great. And like look at those deep passes. Against Atlanta on that first drive where he hit dots up Deontay and then George kind of back-to-back. That's a better quarterback, not just leader, person, NFL player. That's a better quarterback than we saw last year, too. And I think that deserves bringing up. But Nick Herbig's been phenomenal.
Yeah, 100%. Just putting you on the spot there because we didn't even have that in our pre-show notes. So great job there with on the fly.
I like it. I'm perfectly okay with that. I've been prepped for this extensively because I go on the fan a lot with Paul Zeiss. And, I've covered like four teams. And, I've covered the Penguins, I've covered the Pirates, I've covered the Steelers, I've covered Pitt, covered the Riverhounds too. Count them five if you want. And Paul never tells me what we're going to talk about beforehand. And because I've covered all those teams, he feels comfortable asking me about all those teams. So it's literally like I go on and it's not even like, I don't know what Steelers topic we're going to talk about. Like, we could do a whole segment about Pitt basketball. I don't know. Maybe. It's great. I love Paul. It's awesome. And I love that he trusts me to answer questions about anything. But it's great prep for like, hey, whatever you got, just hit me with it. I'm fine with it. It can't be more random than I've already dealt with.
Yeah, and I'm supposed to be the voice of the fans on here, so I feel like as we continue to do this show more and more, that will
whatever
become
pops in your head is fine by me,
I don't know about whatever, but we'll see. We'll see how far we can stretch that. I do. There's actually quite a bit of YouTube stuff that I think would be fun to get into, but I do want to ask you one more thing in terms of. So we saw the one trade with Kevin Dotson. Do you think that there could be another trade here? Obviously, we have the round of cuts that we know is going to be coming tomorrow, and if so, like where could you see that being on the roster? Whether it's an outgoing player or an ingoing player, what group do you think we could see?
Well, the short answer is yes. I mean, I think Omar Khan has already taught us that when you think Omar Khan is done, Omar Khan is not done, right? Like, I don't think he's going to be the kind of GM that is ever going to just be like, yeah, good. I don't see that. I think he's a guy that is going to keep trying to make his team better. And so I expect him to be actively engaged in trades going forward. Now, where could those be? We talked about Kendrick Green. I would not be like falling on my face astonished if they can find a trade for him, even if it's nothing of real, conditional 7th round pick or whatever. But just to, if somebody really wants him to put him in a good place, I think there's a couple other places they could look to make a trade from their depth. I think defensive tackle is one of them. I really wrestled. I found a way on my 53-man projection to get all 8 defensive linemen on the team. But, I mean, they probably don't need all 8 of them, right? If they could find something or someone that wants something for an Armin Watts or Monty Adams or Braden Fajoko, why not, right? I think they could probably make a move like that. That's probably it in terms of Mason Rudolph, I guess, would be the one. I mean, look, we're talking about teams trading for and starting Josh Dobbs. We have to at least entertain the idea that Mason Rudolph is worth something to someone because, frankly, I think he's a better quarterback than Josh Dobbs. So, if somebody worse than you is starting for a team and you're the third stringer, okay, there's probably going to be some phone calls made anyway at that point. We'll see if anything develops from that. I will say I did not feel super impressed by Tanner Morgan this preseason and would be doubtful that he would be the option if they did make that trade. They'd probably be looking at Colt McCoy, who got cut by the Cardinals today, or someone like that to come in and be that number 3. I don't think it would be Morgan. That's probably the only place I see depth that they could trade from. In terms of places they could look to add, I think backup center is the one that jumps out to everyone, right? I mean, they really could use someone to solidify that spot in a way that hasn't been all off season. Slot corner, I still think is a place they could upgrade. I would really love to see them find a way to get somebody in there that you just feel better about playing. Not that I think Shannon Sullivan and Elijah Riley are NFL players, but they are give me a guy that I could go out there with the Bengals and say, you're locking down Tyler Boyd all game and feel good about it. I don't see that option on this roster right now. Where's the guy for those teams that really roll 3 deep at wide receiver? Who's locking down Sky Moore when the Chiefs, I just don't know that they have that answer. And I would think that would be a place I would be interested in seeing them make an addition. It's a pretty deep team. Other than that, I don't feel like they have a lot of glaring obvious weaknesses. But if they're going to make a move, those are the moves that I see out there for them to make. And hey, one more, Braden Mann, the backup punter or competing punter, I guess however you want to say it, he's still around. There's a report by Adam Kaplan out there. The Eagles are interested in him. Maybe they could get something for him, and they did claim him on waivers. It's not like he was available to the entire league when they got him. So it seemed like the Eagles did not get a shot at him when the Jets waived him because the Steelers claimed him ahead. Could they ring? I remember they made that trade for Brad Wing. I'm dating myself here, but they were able to get something out of one of their punters. Maybe it's Mann, maybe it's Harvin. But if somebody out there is like, hey, we'll give you something for one of the punters, and they think there's not that much of a difference between the two, then maybe they make that move too.
Yeah, I know it's a kicker, but the Browns just traded a day 3 pick for a kicker today from the Chargers to the kicker that lost that competition and was going to be cut anyway. So, special teams.
Dicker, the kicker, Cameron Dicker from Texas, he won his battle, and we love to see that.
Of course he did.
Because,
there was never a doubt he was going to win that battle. Alan, you actually have a nickname, I think, at least within one person here. Someone was calling you Slander, Alan
Slander.
Slander, on YouTube. Yeah,
Like,
and
because I'm ripping people
I
unfairly?
don't know. I mean, we can get into a comment here, and we'll see what it says and see why
Okay.
they're calling you this. But they say you've been, but then they agree with at least your one comment about this. So they says what I've been thinking all along. Pat P cannot play slot, although I don't know if you're going to agree with this part. Hell, Minka cannot either. I said when Millette issue came up, no good pay for an apex difficult position. Slot will become a bigger money position over the next decade with the way wide receivers are utilized. As inside linebacker wanes, slot rises. They will utilize Pat P as a third safety, Rod Woodson-esque. He is not the tackler that Minka and Neil KZ are. Ball hawking is what he is here for.
I agree with most of that. I think slot is an underappreciated position around the NFL right now. I do think we're going to sort of see it normalized that like teams call three corners starters more than they do right now. And I think you're going to see some slot corners I think we've already seen it in the draft. Like if you went to like the Senior Bowl this year, there were a ton of guys at the Senior Bowl this year that were like just slot corners,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
they usually could not play outside. Like that's a real thing. Like those are guys that would not have been at the Senior Bowl 5 years ago because NFL scouts and GMs have been like, he's 5'9". What do I have use for him? Get him out of here. Now they're like, oh, this guy is a useful player to me in this specific role. And so I think that's definitely changing. I don't really love the Steelers slots, as I just said. I don't necessarily, and it's not that I'm doubting him. Maybe this is where the slander comes in. I don't know. We have not seen it from Patrick Peterson, and he's not been great in man coverage the last couple of years. And it doesn't feel like, sometimes when you have a guy playing a different position, you can kind of like feel it out, right? It just feels like a natural fit where, like, oh, the things he's good at would line up with that position better. This doesn't feel like that to me. This feels like kind of like forcing something a little bit. Maybe it works out great. I don't know. But I certainly don't have like the Steelers level of faith in Patrick Peterson being a difference maker in slot corner. I do think it's a more important position than most teams think. I'm not sure I see Patrick Peterson as a safety. I think he is fine at corner. He just needs to be in a zone-heavy scheme that is not what the Steelers are providing. It's more like what the Vikings had last year. However, cover three is kind of going out the window. So maybe if you're talking about a team that plays a lot of cover two, safety would fit because, and not to get like super wonky here, but like cover two defense basically transfers the bulk of the coverage responsibilities from the corners to the safeties. It makes the corners' jobs easier and the safety jobs harder. And cover three, which is what the Steelers have traditionally run, that corner is kind of an island. They kind of have to carry that receiver all the way down the field. Think Ike Taylor, right, was like the sort of prototypical cover three corner. Joey Porter Jr. is very much a prototypical cover three corner. And so I'm interested to see how that plays out. I don't necessarily have like a lot of belief that it's going to work out great right now. I do think in general the slot is a position the Steelers could look to upgrade. I'm not sure I'm slandering anyone with that though. I'm not
Alan, this may have been this could probably be put on me here. So it's if I click on it, it says that the comment was edited and it actually says Saunders. So what may have happened is it was a legit typo and they edited the comment. Yeah.
Typo. But
that is funny though. That is funny that it said slant.
Well, maybe you could just keep the smiley hat on and then I'll be the jerk and it's fine. It'll be great. I think I can live with that role.
And I don't know if this is just Jamie or if it's Jay Amy, but they're very active in the comments and we appreciate that. Like every single episode, they're chiming in. I thought this one was really good too. And this was going back to your recap video from the preseason finale. PTJ says they look like they have a deep, talented roster, look much better than last year. When do you think was the last time they had this deep and talented of a roster?
I mean, talented is easy, right? It's like 2018. Deep, though, man, that's a good question. It's been a long time. I probably back to like 2015-ish, they were pretty deep, right? Like, that's about the last time. And then the 2010 Super Bowl team was pretty deep. That 2015 team was pretty good. I think that's probably the way I would go, but it's been a while. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. No, yeah. Nick and I were actually talking because Tyler asked us when we were doing that show, when I asked for questions on Twitter, or X. No, we're calling it Twitter. When the last time we thought that the team was as deep, well, he asked about the offense specifically, so this was also incorporating the defense. But yeah, I feel like it's been a minute. Actually, this one was from Jamie or J Amy. Let me know how to say that too, the best way that you can. Is it supposed to be separated? Because you're always down here, so I'd like to know how to exactly pronounce your name while on here. What is the over/under, do you think, of 53 man players or 53 cuts from the Steelers that will be picked up from another squad? So, like, how many guys end up on different teams' rosters?
That's a great question. I'll put.
They said 3. They gave a number as well on here.
I think less than 3. I don't think there were that many. I think the Steelers have the ability to really get this. Like, man could be one. That's not like something I'm really thinking of. It could be. They have tough cuts. I think they can sort of get them in a way that they minimize the number of players that they get snapped up, but maybe not. I don't know. They definitely have more. When was the last one of those? That's a good question too. Like, I feel like that has not happened very much recently, at all. Yeah, I'll say 2. I think Braden Mann will end up on being one of those 2, and then I'll say one of the position players. So I'll go with 2. But they could make a trade too, and then that number would go down if they make a trade.
Right, absolutely. Okay. Anything else on your mind? That was good.
No, lots of stuff up at SteelersNow.com talking about all the cuts, some analysis from Nick, and Derek Bell is going to tell us who should have made the team, which may not jive with what is happening. I think that's it. Cuts tomorrow. Be busy. So tomorrow, we'll be on right after the cuts, so we'll know sort of exactly who the 53 is going to be.
Awesome. Great timing. I think it's almost like they did this just for us in terms of the timing, right? That's what they said.
Yeah. They were like, the NFL trade deadline is just before Steelers afternoon drive on Tuesday. That's
makes sense. All right, Alan, tell the people where they can find you. You already kind of talked about the site.
At @Saunders_PGH, Pittsburgh SteelersNow.com. PGH Steelers Now is the site's Twitter handle. It's also our YouTube page, and where you can find this practice video. There's some cool stuff on YouTube. Scroll up one video here of Alfredo Roberts going over sort of the footwork of Darnell Washington in a run blocking setting, and Darnell blocks Rodney Williams out of the frame. Which is, so go check that one out. It's kind of fun, and that's all the stuff.
All right, good stuff. Yeah, so go check out that video. Check out the other videos. Subscribe. Leave us a comment. Of course, we love reading the comments.
10,000 still. We'll get the whole song. We need it to happen.
Yeah, it's not happening until 10,000. So get us to 10,000 subscribers, then we're going to play the entire song that you guys hear, like 10 seconds of or whatever, for our intro. I'm Zachary Smith, PGH. Like I said, that is Alan Saunders. Thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on Steelers Afternoon Drive.